Hey worship keys players. Okay, so have you ever been asked to play worship keys in a band with 6 electric guitarists, 2 drummers, a percussionist, 3 acoustic guitar players, a banjo, and a cello? I mean, probably not, right? That scenario is not super common, but it is the topic of today's video, sort of. We're gonna talk about how to play keys in a crowded band. So first of all, let me just say that every band is different, and even if your band and my band are playing the same songs, don't take what I'm going to talk about in this video as prescriptive, but rather just something for you to think through, filter through, and figure out what might make the most sense for your team. Now, when we're talking about playing keys in a crowded band, you might have a different picture of what that means than someone else might. So for the sake of this video, for this example, let's have a hypothetical band with 2 electric guitarists, an acoustic guitarist, a bassist, a drummer, and you are on keys playing piano parts, pads, synths, all of it from the keys 1 position. Now let's also say that generally in your band for this particular weekend's set list, your electric guitarists are going to be covering the lead parts and the hooks for the songs that you're going to be playing. Now, as keys players, I think there's 2 main considerations we need to talk about when we talk about playing in a more crowded band. And I think generally what causes problems is ignoring one or the other of these considerations. So the first that I think is really important and often gets ignored is the sounds that you choose to use themselves. The sounds themselves play a huge role in determining how you fit into a crowded mix. If you have a lot of other instruments on stage and all of the sounds you choose are full spectrum, big, wide, deep, high, mid-range, heavy sounds, then you're gonna have a really hard time competing for sonic space with everyone else on your team. So the first consideration I think is so important is figuring out how the sounds you choose will affect the way that you blend in to a crowded band. So as you're thinking about the sounds you want to try to use, you can try and emulate the sounds you're hearing on the original recording, and you can also work with your worship leader to figure out what suits the sound of your band. But you just have to be careful knowing that your band isn't the same band as the band that recorded the original song. So what sounded perfect and beautiful in a controlled studio or live album recording environment might not actually sound quite as perfect with the band that you have, because your electric guitarist's tone might be different. The room you're playing in is definitely going to be different than that arena rock stadium that the live album was recorded in. So definitely use that as an inspiration, but then try and contextualize to the team that you're actually going to be playing with. If you can take the time to nail down the context that your sounds are going to be used in, then you'll make sure that everything you do supports and enhances the rest of your band instead of fights with and competes with the sounds that they choose. So that's the first consideration. Make sure that you consider the character, the space, and the size of the sounds themselves. Now, the second consideration that I think is one of the 2 things that can cause a lot of problems is what you play with the sounds that you choose. So you have the sounds themselves, and then you have the notes, the chords, the melody lines, the hooks that you actually play on the keyboard. And I think oftentimes as keys players, it's really easy to focus on one or the other. We can spend lots of time dialing in our sounds very precisely with great intention and then forget to practice the parts. So we might overplay, we might underplay, we might be so focused on how our sounds sound that we're playing all over our electric guitarist lead lines. Or the opposite can happen. We can be playing all of the perfect parts with sounds that don't suit the song. So that's the second consideration, is make sure that you figure out how you can play parts that complement your band. Now, if it's a piano-driven song, it's a great idea to listen to the original recording and try and pick out those parts and recreate them or put your own spin on them if that's something that your band likes to do. But if it's an electric guitar-driven song, if it's an acoustic guitar-driven song and there's not a lot going on for keys and piano players, then it's really important that no matter how great your sounds are, that you make sure that what you play with those sounds doesn't distract or compete with what the rest of your team is doing. So when it comes to filling the right amount of space in a crowded band as a keys player, when you're choosing what you play, I think that it's actually most important that you think with great intention about what you're not going to play. What lead lines am I not going to double? Where am I going to intentionally stay out of the way of the melody? Now, obviously, you want to play and you're here to use your skill and bring your talent to the team, but being able to choose moments to not do something, I think, is what separates good keys players from great keys players, and that's especially important as your band grows in size, as you have more complex arrangements and different people playing different things across different instruments. So again, I'm speaking in generalities here. This is not a one-size-fits-all prescription. But what I want to say is, don't never do the things I'm about to talk about, but if you're going to do them, make sure that you intentionally decide to do them. I want to give you 2 things to only do when you're doing them on purpose. First is doubling a melody line or an electric guitar line. Now this can be an awesome effect and it can really serve the song well. It can make sense even in a crowded band to add a little bit of extra thickness and complexity, or to add some harmonic interest to a melody line. It can sound great, but it can also really quickly get in the way of or derail what the lead vocalist is doing or what an electric guitarist is trying to highlight during a moment of a song. So don't never double or harmonize a lead part from a guitar or vocal, but when you do so, make sure that you choose to do so with intention and that you think about how your sounds and your note placement could enhance or distract from what the lead instrument or lead vocalist is doing. The second thing to really intentionally decide to do, instead of just doing by default, is play tightly knit, closed position chords, especially when you're playing a rhythm instrument like a piano or something with a full frequency range like a warm pad sound. Sometimes it can sound really, really great to play complex chord voicings in a tighter knit closed position because it can add lots of thickness and intensity to a moment. I think a great example of this is the color chords that are a part of the piano intro to the song Here As in Heaven by Elevation Worship. There's some less commonly used chords that are thrown into the piano parts there, and it is beautiful and enhances the song in a really great way that makes that piano part a little bit more impactful and memorable. But if you take those same types of color chords and you tried to play them during an upbeat techno song from Hillsong Young and Free, then you're really going to have a hard time not getting in the way of what everybody else is doing. You're not going to be serving the song. So don't never play more complex chord voicings, but when you do so, choose to do so with intention. Make sure that you're not getting in the way of the voicings that your rhythm guitarists are playing. Make sure that you're not playing color notes that no one else in the band is clued in on, unless that's an intentional decision that you guys decide to make as a team. So first thing to do with intention only is double lead lines from guitarists or the lead vocalist, and the second is to think very intentionally before you play more complex chord voicings, especially when those notes are spread really closely together. So now that we've talked about these abstract concepts, let me make this a little bit more concrete for you. I'm going to play the same chord progression 2 different ways. In the first example, I'm going to use sounds that maybe haven't been chosen to serve the song, more aggressive sounds with a lot of frequency spectrum being taken up, a lot of brightness, a lot of thickness and width. And I'm going to play some pretty complex chord voicings and do a lot of stuff in my right hand to sort of add flair and interest. And in the second example, I'm going to play the same chord progression, but with more subdued sounds. So in this context, we're playing maybe a slower worship song, and I'm going to space my chords out in such a way that there's going to be lots of room for other people in this crowded band to fill sonic space. Now, I don't want these examples to come across as exaggerated, and it's totally going to depend on the songs you're playing, whether or not that's overplaying or underplaying. But what I want you to get from these examples is that the sounds you choose and how you choose to play with those sounds is the key to fitting in to a crowded mix, making sure that you stand out when you're supposed to and that you support and enhance at all other times. I'm really excited that you're taking the time to think through this and make sure that you're approaching all that you do as a keys player with excellence, because just taking the time to think through these things a little bit the next time you're preparing your set list is going to make a huge impact in the contribution you make to your own worship team. All right, folks, so we'd love to hear from you in the comments. What tips do you have for playing in a crowded band? Or maybe you think all of my tips are wrong and you want to disagree. So the YouTube comments are definitely the place to do that. But we'd also love to hear from you with your questions and thoughts. What are some common problems that you run into when you're trying to fit in with a lot of other instruments? Because we'd like to do more videos on this topic. If this video was helpful for you, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for supporting us at Sunday Sounds. Have a great day.